What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining me on another FCP Euro DIY. Today we are working on a 2018 Volvo XC90. Today on the XC90, we are going to be covering how to replace your rear shocks. We are going to be upgrading them with a kit that is available to buy on fcpo.com, which includes everything you need to do this DIY. We have two Bilstein B6 shocks, some new shock mounts, bump stops, bellows, and all the hardware necessary. We're upgrading from the standard B4 replacement to the B6. People have reported a little bit of swaying on the back of these XC90s, so the B6 should provide a little bit of a stiffer ride, not really affecting comfort, but really just providing more stability, which will also help if you tow a lot as well. They will help give a little bit more stability throughout towing, so should be a nice upgrade and a good replacement for your XC90 or SPA-chassis Volvo. But before we get too hairy here, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this DIY. For this DIY, we're going to be using a torque wrench. We have two, a 1/2 inch drive and a 3/8 drive. Same thing for our ratchets, 1/2 inch and 3/8. We have about 9 inches of extensions here on our 3/8 drive bits. We have a small 3-inch one for the 1/2 inch, 19 mil socket, 15 mil socket, and we have two 13s, a 1/2 inch and a 3/8 drive. As far as specialty tools, we're using our shock and strut socket set from CTA. This is CTA 7466. It's going to help us assemble our new units. We have a tape measure, a paint pen, some electric tools, electric ratchet, and a 1/2 inch impact. Not pictured, but needed is going to be a either screw jack or floor jack if you're working on the ground or on a lift. Something that will help us set ride height, which we'll cover in a little bit. But other than that, it should be pretty straightforward. Again, watch the whole DIY through. You may be able to lessen the amount of tools you need, or you might have to modify something for whatever you have at home. But now with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right, before we get started, we want to make sure we take note of the ride height as we're going to be tightening down the suspension at ride height. What does that mean? That means that there's some bushing sometimes on the suspension components that when tightened down need to happen at where the car is going to live for the most part. If you lift up the vehicle, the wheel's going to droop. And if you tighten all your new parts down at full droop, then what you're doing is you're putting extra stress on the bushings. You can tear them or prematurely wear them while also giving your car a more bouncy ride than necessary. So the easiest thing you can do is before you lift up the vehicle, take your tape measure from the center of the hub, the center of the wheel, measure the distance from that to a fixed point on the body of the car. So the bottom of the arch here would be perfect. Take that measurement and whatever that may be, let's just use an example. This was 20 inches. When you go to install your new hardware and you use your screw jack or floor jack, which we'll cover later, you want to make sure that that distance is the same, 20 inches or whatever your measurement may be at home, before you tighten down those bolts. So we'll cover that as we go through the DIY, but something to note before you get started. In an extreme case where maybe you're already on the lift or the car's already been apart and you didn't get that measurement, the other thing you can do is just get weight off of the corner of the floor jack and or lift arm, depending on what you're working on. And then once you get to that point, you know that's kind of where this load is going to be to take the weight of the body of the car. So with that, let's get started. We have 5 19mm lug bolts to remove first. If your car still has beauty covers on these lug bolts, pop them off with like a little pick or a flathead screwdriver, and then you can pull the lugs off. And use our 19mm CTA socket. Get these babies zapped off. This wheel is a little crusty, so it's sticking to the hub, but be mindful with these wheels with these cars that use lug bolts instead of lug nuts, there's nothing holding the wheel on, so it can just fall on you. Something to keep in mind. All right, now we have our wheel off. We have a better view of the top shock mount and the bottom shock bolt. Let's start with the shock mount. We'll get those 413 zapped out, and then we'll move on to the bottom shock. We have a 15 mil for this bottom bolt. Beautiful. All right, now we have it out. Let's head over to the workbench. We'll show you how to assemble our new one and go from there. All right, it's time to assemble our new shock assembly. We don't have to take anything apart from the old one, mainly because we're replacing everything. While these bump stops are still intact on the old shocks, you can see just by the color difference, they're pretty weathered, and eventually they're gonna start dry rotting and fall apart. This you can probably reuse if it doesn't break when you separate it, but the plastic can get brittle. We are going to be saving the dust cap though off the top. You will notice though that with said dust cap, This is really crusty. So if you were gonna work at taking this apart to save this plastic bellow, probably not worth it in my opinion. Nonetheless, if you were to disassemble, it is quite literally the opposite of what we're about to do with the new one. First, we're gonna join the bump stop to the bellow. There's a plastic ring on here, and that's gonna live within this ridged portion of our bellow. We're just gonna pop it in. This can be a little bit tedious sometimes. You just gotta work that baby in. Let's see if we can just get it to pop in. You're gonna overshoot it, which happens every time, and then you just pull it back a little bit until it clips into place. This doesn't really bite into the bottom of the shock mount. It just kind of sits there, but that's okay because it's gonna live on the shaft of the shock anyways, and it's still gonna do its job. We're gonna take our new locking nut off. We're gonna slide this baby over, and now our threaded portion is sticking through the top of the mount. We're gonna get that nut started, and then we're gonna use our pass-through set. Out of that set, we're using the 5mm hex and the 16mm pass-through socket. Torque spec for the M10 thread on the Bilstein is 25 Newton meters. Not a lot, you really just need to snug it up, and then a less than 1/8 of a turn and you're there. So for our sake, that's what we're gonna do today. Once you have it all together, if you manage to squeeze a torque wrench in that little area, once this is all bolted to the car, you can double check your work that way. But again, 25 Newton meters, think of an oil drain plug or something like that. That's all it is, not a lot. We're gonna use our table to kind of hold for us. Beautiful. Something I like to do, just in case you have to take this apart again, I know we didn't cover this as a tool per se, but put a little bit of ceramic paste or something similar on the top here, just to help kind of seal that from the elements so that it doesn't look like this one right here. Next time someone has to do this job, maybe something failed or you need to do something separate and you need to separate these two, it'll make your life a little bit easier. Dust cap can go back up top. These just live on like that. Now let's head back to the Volvo and get this baby installed. I'm just gonna line up the bottom shock mount and get that bolt fed through. All right, that's perfect. Now we'll get our new bolt started up top. The goal here, as you're getting these to kind of snug up onto the body of the car, it helps to either use a floor jack if you're on the ground or just your hand and kind of give the arm a little bit of a push up. You want to make sure that the bolt is not fighting the mount and it's also situated nice and flush against the body of the car. We're gonna get these just snugged up a little bit and then we'll use the floor jack or the screw jack to just ride it up a little bit so that the bolts are riding on the mount. That way when the car's back on the ground later, you don't hear a thump because you tighten these with the mount hanging down too low. All right, we have our screw jack situated at the bottom of our control arm. We're just gonna go up a little bit until we bottom out the mount against the hardware. You don't wanna bend the hardware, you just wanna get it nice and snug, just like that. And we'll send them in the rest of the way and then give them their final torque. And these get snugged down to 70 Newton meters. With that situated, we can focus on the 15mm bolt at the bottom. We're gonna set our ride height again using our tape measure and our screw jack. We'll bring it up to the measurement that we had before we lifted the car and took off the wheel. And then once we're set with that, we'll snug down that 15mm at the bottom. All right, the 15 gets torqued down to 90 Newton meters plus 120 degrees. Well, now with that, you have successfully installed a new shock in the rear of your XC90. With that, we're gonna get rid of the screw jack, do the same thing on the driver's side, same exact steps. And now we can get our wheel back on and button up this baby. All right, my good people, from this point on, we're gonna get our lug bolts back in. We're gonna cinch them up in a crisscross pattern just to make sure that the wheel is sitting nice and flush against the hub. Once that's good to go, we'll drop it back down on the ground. And in the same crisscross pattern, we'll snug up the lug bolts with our torque wrench to 140 Newton meters. Otherwise, with that, that's going to conclude today's DIY on the XC90. A very easy and straightforward replacement for once. You don't have to tear apart the interior or anything of that sort. Be sure to check out the front strut DIY as well if you're looking for that replacement to do all 4 corners on your XC90. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave those in the comment section below. And if you like this DIY and you'd like to see more like them, consider subscribing. We make new ones all day, every day. As always, thank you for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.